Good morning, guys. If you are watching this recorded, it is for Module 2, and that means that you're almost one-third of the way through the course once you get through this week, so welcome. Let's take a look here at where we're at. Let me share my application screen. Good morning to those of you who are entering this live as well. Of course, we have both live and recorded watchers, so either one of those is okay. Neither one of those is better or worse. It depends on your schedule. So let's take a look at Module 2. We have, actually, let me look at our activities first, so you get a broad overview of where we're at this week. As you all mentioned, or as you all noticed last week, it is a lot to do, and again, you're accomplishing almost 2.5 to 3 weeks worth of work in every week because of the fact that this is a 6-week course, as compared to a normal traditional class, which is 16 weeks long. And some of you are doing both, I know, and all of you that are doing the 16-week courses as well, you're coming on the end of finals week. Coming up here shortly, so you're already kind of freaking out, and then you're in the middle of starting this class, so it's a lot to think through. So please make sure that you make yourself a plan for the week to make this happen. Also, a reminder, if you have not yet completed the course preparation quiz here, you can find it in Module 1 activities. If you haven't done that yet, go back to Module 1 and make sure that you have done this course preparation quiz. Indiana Tech does use it in order to make sure that you are participating in the class. Sometimes they bump you out accidentally, even if you've done something else, if you haven't done the course preparation quiz. So make sure that you have done that. Okay, now let's take a look at Module 2. All right, so we have, of course, our discussion board, but I'm going to scroll down here because, as you know, even though they give you a suggested pacing for the course, I think there's a better one. And that would be first, of course, for you to either participate live or watch this recorded, and then go down here to the bottom and do this tech live reflection so that you get that off of your plate and also have an overview of what's going on. So you have something started with the week and you're feeling ready to go. So that's my first recommendation to do is this live tech reflection. Then go up here and take a look at what's due for the discussion board. That's your first thing that's going to be due on Thursday. You guys did, by the way, a really great job of doing Module 1 discussion board, so I was really pleased with that. By the way, the grades are in case you want to take a look at your grades for Module 1 after you're finished with this. So Part 1 is, of course, the initial post. That has to be done by Thursday. Part 2 is the replies. And again, it says that they're due by Saturday, but please get those done before that. It says they're due on Sunday, right? Make sure you do that before that on Friday or Saturday. Again, what that does is it gives you the opportunity to review other people's and take a look and say, oh, I see what other people are doing. Now I can adjust my thoughts based on what I'm seeing. It also gives them a chance to see your thoughts and go, oh, maybe I didn't do this quite right. Maybe I misunderstood. I can rectify that before something is due on Sunday. All right, so that's what this stuff is. Again, remember, you see here that there are exactly things to do for each one. You guys did a really good job of doing that, so I'm not too worried about that, but you know, Module 2 is similar. All right, so then you also have these things to do, and these are the things to do. There's also some reading, so we'll get back over to that in a second. You want to do the readings next, so after you watch this reflection, then you want to go back over to the things, the preparation stuff that we'll get to in a minute. You want to do the readings first, then you want to do the discussion board, and then you want to do Journal 3, 4, and Project 2. So let's take a look at those more in depth. We're going to look here at Journal 3. It's similar to last week in that you had this first journal is a lot of questions for you to do the reading and then answer the questions. You'll see here they'll talk you through some things about ethnographic writing, which you probably have no idea what that is as much yet, except for Module 1, right? You're going to be reading some essays that will help you with that will help you continue thinking through your observations and what they entail. Last week was pretty good for your first time through, so this time you'll get a little better at those and looking at things, maybe making better observations, more detailed observations. It feels a little awkward to make an observation, to be in a space and be observing other people and writing them down while not participating, right? I do some writing for our local paper, Ink Free News, and I do an article called Diners and Dives, which is kind of that, where I am part of a group of people and I'm in a diner or a dive and we're having conversation, but I'm also the observer. And it's awkward to be both part of something and not part of something simultaneously. So I understand the difficulties that you have in that case. So these are the questions. Again, what you'll do is just kind of copy and paste those over to a Microsoft Word document and then answer those questions there. Okay, any questions for anybody live so far on Journal 3? Okay, again, feel free to interrupt me if you're here live at any point in time if you have a question. Okay, Journal 4, this one, you'll notice, again, is another observation log and reflection. You'll have to go back into the Module 1 resources to find that observation log again, or so many of you put together a little template for yourself. You could go back into your own template and reuse it again by taking out the stuff that you already used and doing another observation. Okay, so that's there for that one. Now, the other one that you're preparing for, of course,
Hey, Gisela. She was on teaching and just disconnected, so I sent her an email hoping she jumps back on, but in case you wondered, she was here and then we lost her.
Thanks for texting me. I'm not sure how we got lost there, but let me start over here by going back over to our Module 2 resources. We wanted to talk through library databases and why we should use library databases and scholarly journals. So let me start by going back over to our library database, and let's restart this so we can get a feel for that. Here we go. Okay, so that's our first video. The second thing we want to watch, you're probably asking what's a scholarly journal, so let's take a look at that one.
I don't think these are sharing.
I think we have two. Sorry, guys. I'm not sure why it's not letting me open it up without doubling it. So let's start that over. Let's go a little bit further here. There we go. Okay, so you may be irritated by that guy's voice, but this is the thing that you want to remember when you're searching in the library. And this is what I was going over when apparently we lost feed. So I'm assuming that you guys did not see me going through the Macmillan Library and showing you how to find this. But again, in the Macmillan Library, when you pull up the Indiana Tech Library site, you're going to see a Google-like sort of box. Right beneath it, you're going to see an advanced search. Click on advanced search. It's going to take you up to a lot more options. And you're going to scroll down on the left-hand side, and you're going to click on full text, and you're going to click on peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed means the same thing as scholarly, so that's where you're going to find these in the Indiana Tech site. You don't have to use Indiana Tech. You can use the main Google, but it's much harder to find a scholarly source. Okay, so now that we've gotten through our technical issues, again, keep that in mind. These other things here that you're going to be reading are going to help you with those ideas as well. But the videos will talk you through, like, what is a scholarly resource? If you're looking at something and not sure, the first thing to do is always to scroll to the end of the source and look and see, do they have references or works cited or a bibliography? If they don't, it's almost impossible for it to be a scholarly source, because scholarly sources always list those at the end. So that's a good big red flag if there's nothing there. And the other one was, there's something usually about the author that kind of tells you this is the author's credentials. Okay, so that's a big review to look for. Keep in mind, if you're going into Macmillan Library, the first thing that's going to pop up on the bottom right corner, if it's during the library business hours, is a little chat box. You can always type to a librarian and say, this is a source I have, is it scholarly or not? And they're going to say yes or no, because that's their job, right? Okay, so keep that in mind too. Lots of resources to figure that out. Okay, so again, you're going to be reading these other things as well that are going to help you through that idea. Okay, now, let's take a look over here. I'm going to share my application screen again, a little different. Okay, so let's take a look here at Module 2. Again, this is your overview. What do we have that are due? We started there. Hopefully you heard that part. Journal 3, which is another discourse observation, right? Or questions, and then this is the discourse observation of an online community. Project 2, right? This is the Project 2 stuff that I was going over. I'm hoping that got recorded too. Let me look up ahead to Module 3, so next week. Look what's due next week. I'm going to click on Journal 5. So all of these things here, all of these things that you're doing in Module 1, Module 2, Module 3, all of them are sort of leading you down the path of learning about discourse communities, learning about observations, learning about ethnography. In Journal 5, you're going to be choosing an oral history to view or listen to from a collection provided. That'll give you another way of looking at that. Okay, so you can see how these things will kind of go together. You're also going to be learning how to do interviews next week, because as I told you in module number 1, remember that Project 3. In Project 3, you're going to be doing an interview. So be thinking through in all of the different discourse communities, both live and online and all these different things, be thinking through a particular person that you might want to interview and start asking those questions now, because you're going to need to set it up during probably module 3 and 4 mostly. So start thinking about it, asking people so that you have that ready to go by the time we get there. So again, another heads up warning about that one, right? Okay, so this is what you're kind of putting together this week. It's a lot, again, right? Lots of things to do. Journal 1, or Journal 3, Journal 4, and Project 2. Okay, so in order to kind of give you a little bit more fleshed out ideas, I wanted to see what we could do with more ethnographic stuff, and give you some views, a broader view of society, not just Indiana Tech, not just the society that you're thinking about, but how other people in the world have used these exact same concepts. So I have a couple of videos for you to watch that will elucidate a little bit more of those. So here we go.
40 years ago, if you sat in front of a computer, this is what you would see. A blinking cursor waiting patiently for you to tell it what to do. If you wanted to see your files, you would type ls for list, and then it would show you your files like this. They'd all look the same, even though some might be text, some might be images. But now, if you want to see your files, you just open up the folder and you look. And you can see some are text, some are images, because they look that way. If you wanted to move a file from one folder to another, you would type mv for move, the name of the file, isaacsbio.doc, and then something like .. .. which is the location of the destination folder, local, relative to the current folder. Now, you drag the file from one folder to another. We take this visual display of our files and folders for granted, but somebody had to think of that. At a time when everybody who used computers typed those kinds of cryptic commands, somebody had to first notice that this wasn't so easy, and second, think of a better way to do it. Someone had to think that you could draw little pictures of files and folders on the screen and manipulate them by dragging a little box around on the tabletop. Well, those people were Doug Engelbart and Alan Kay. Engelbart invented the mouse, and Kay invented what's called graphical user interfaces. At the time, Alan Kay worked at Xerox PARC in California, which is where I work today. And in 1971, he said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that's what he did. So this was at a time when computers looked like this. Giant boxes of technology and big rooms hooked up to these terminals, which is where you type those commands. They were very expensive, so you had to share them, and people would sign up for time on the computer. So it's not surprising that at a time like this, Ken Olsen, the head of a very big computer company called Digital, said, there's no way anyone would want a computer in the home. Somebody had to think.
So what we're showing you here is how ethnography works in the real world and how other people have made it work for them by observation. So
think that you could take all that technology and compress it into a little box that would sit on the desktop, and it would be dedicated to just one person's use. So that's something we all take for granted now, but at the time, that would be extravagant. Well, those people worked at Xerox PARC, and in 1973, they invented the Alto, the first graphical personal computer. And that led to the Apple Macintosh, the IBM PC, and now all the slick desktop, laptop, and tablet computers that we all use today. So we're here today talking about the best of what Broadway can be. And I think that the reason that I was invited here is that the organizers were hoping that some of that magic from the early park scientists is still lingering in the halls where I work, revealing to me a vision of where you will be in 20 years. Well, I'm afraid that hasn't happened, but there is one bit of park magic that I can share with you, and it has to do with a method that you can use to figure it out, called ethnography. So let's go back to the 1980s when a Xerox copier took up an entire room. There was another park scientist, Lucy Suchman, and she had the idea that maybe if you're building technology for people, you should watch them using it. So she decided to watch some people using a Xerox copier. She grabbed a couple of her colleagues from down the hall, and she asked them to make copies. So I'm going to show you a short clip of a video from this historic video of these two people making copies.
All your business needs, one single platform. Go to Wix.com and get a robust booking solution that takes your business further.
Place 1 to 50 originals. Well, wait a minute, I have 100 originals. Face up. Place all originals against the left wall. We want two-sided copies. Unload top paper tray. Now, do we want them collated? What? Reverse order the originals? You gotta be kidding. This is definitely a bug. Press start.
Navigate to that. Unload.
Unload
No,
top paper
we didn't do
tray.
that. That's not this. That's not the paper tray. It doesn't say what the paper tray is. No? So our first batch
Our first,
is SOL.
what is that?
Shit out of
Well, we sure did come up with a lot of paper.
So it turns out that those two people from down the hall are world-renowned computer scientists. One of them went on to win the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in computer science. So clearly the problem is not that the people are dumb, the problem was with the design of the copier. Today, it is now common practice for companies to do what's called usability testing. But back then, it wasn't done. Lucy Stutzman had to think of it. And she went further.
Right, so keep that in mind. Usability testing is another word for observation, right?
She realized that you could observe people not just to figure out how to make their products easier to use, but also to figure out what products to build in the first place. So this practice of observing people in their natural environments to understand their needs is called ethnography. At the time, it was an academic practice. It grew out of anthropology. Lucy Stutzman was the first one to apply it to industry. So even today, not everybody uses ethnography. Most companies will try to understand their customers' needs by asking them directly using tools like focus groups or surveys. But asking people to tell you what they want gets you only so far. As the anthropologist Margaret Mead said, what people say, what people do, and what people say they do are entirely different things. When people do their jobs or just any ordinary activity, much of what you do just becomes invisible to you. It's just what you do. But if you watch people, you start to realize a lot of times people are working around their tools. And it's these gaps or problems people work around that are opportunities for innovation. The thing is, a lot of times when you point them out to people, they'll say, well, sure, it's obvious that's a problem. But they don't think to tell you about it when you ask. To notice it, you have to get out and watch. So I like to think of my job as an ethnographer like this. You sit and you watch the chaos that is human behavior. And if you're patient and you watch for a while and you have a naive state of mind, you start to notice insights that are obvious after you point them out. You start to notice the hidden obvious. Well, how does this work? What is ethnography like? Well, let me give you two examples from my work. So the last couple of years, I've been studying parking. Now, I realize parking is an odd place to go looking for technology opportunities. But we all know, New Yorkers especially, the parking is an area where there's a lot of problems and a lot of needs not being met. So to study parking, my colleagues and I have spent a lot of time hanging around on street corners, watching cars parking, trucks unloading, enforcement officers giving tickets, and we've seen a lot of things you might expect and some that you might not. So one of the things that we started to notice gradually was the parking signs and how difficult it can be to tell the one thing you want to know quickly, can I park here now in the few seconds you have as you're driving by? So I'm going to show you a sign for about that amount of time, and I want you to figure out, can you park here now? Let's say it's Wednesday, early in the morning, it's 7 a.m. Can you park here now? Okay, let's look again. Okay, this is hard not just because there's so much going on, but you'll notice that Wednesday is not mentioned and 7 a.m. is not in any of the time ranges. So you have to infer that because it's not covered, you can park here, at least to the left of the signs. Okay, here's another one. It's 3 p.m. Can you stop here now? Okay, let's look again. So the bottom sign says no parking at 3 p.m. So that implies that you can stop. And the top, no stopping sign, doesn't cover 3 p.m. So that implies, again, you have to figure out that you can stop here. Okay, and here's one more where I challenge you to figure out what you can do here at any time. So the problem here is that parking signs focus on restrictions. Know this, know that, when what you want to know is what you can do. Now, when I say it like this, it seems obvious. But when you ask people to tell you what are some of your problems you have with parking, they generally don't go complaining and saying, parking signs are difficult to read quickly as you drive by because they focus on restrictions. To really understand this, you have to get out and watch. And it can take a while. Because we were looking at so many different aspects of parking, the signs didn't really come into focus for us until the fourth city and over 1,000 photos and videos. Once we noticed it, it was obvious. So what could you do about this? Well, one thing you could do is redesign the signs. And so here's one possible way you could design that second sign. And it's on the right, you see it's organized by time of from morning through night. So at any time you can find now, and then you can just look to the right and see, can I park? Green, yes. Red, no. Orange, there's some kind of restriction. Like here, it's deliveries only. And if you want to be kind to internationals, you could include symbols. Okay, so that's one example of how ethnography found an unmet need. Let me give you another one. So we noticed a lot of times when we were out looking that there were a lot of loading zones marked by yellow curbs that weren't being used. Here we are looking for a parking spot, and it's just loading as far as the eye can see, and not very many trucks using it, and yet we can't park. On the other hand, we saw a lot of times when trucks were trying to make deliveries and couldn't find a loading zone. And since they have to park near where they're going to be delivering, they get creative. So they double park, and they block in cars, both diagonal and parallel. They park in the median, blocking cars from turning left. They park in the crosswalk, blocking people from crossing the street. And they park on the sidewalk. So the problem here is that loading zones take up precious parking resources, and yet they don't really meet the need. Again, I point this out, seems obvious, but when we talk to people about the parking problems, they don't say loading zones are inefficient, they say there's not enough parking. So what can you do about this? Well, what you really like to do is to have the spots for loading when they're needed and then make them available to everyone else when they're not. So this is something we're doing right now. We have built a prototype parking meter that can change its state from parking to loading, no parking in other states. And since trucks have GPSs, they have GPSs and they know where they're going, we can take a spot and change it from parking to loading, and then when they come and they park, they can put it back to parking. Okay, so what does all this have to do with Broadway? Well, what I'm trying to say is that while I don't know what you need to do to make Broadway the best it can be, you can get some ideas by using ethnography. It's a very general tool. We've used it in many different domains.
And I'm going to stop at that point because we don't care that much about Broadway either, right? But we do care about ethnography. And we care about the usages of it and why it's useful to us in the real world, right? So that's one example. And I wanted to show you a second one as well. So thinking about this, you're using the tools, you're developing the tools in this particular class about how to use them. What you want to do is think a little bit more broadly. How might this be useful to me in my career, my job, my life? Even if you're talking about your family, this is very useful, right? So here's another quick video that we're going to take a look at.
Laptops on Intel vPro have built-in security that's more effective than other security measures.
In ancient Greece, when anyone, from slaves, soldiers, poets, and politicians, needed to make a big decision on life's most important questions, like, should I get married, or should we embark on this voyage, or should our army advance into this territory, they all consulted the oracle. So this is how it worked. You would bring her a question, and you would get on your knees, and then she would go into this trance. It would take a couple of days, and then eventually she would come out of it giving you her predictions as your answer. From the oracle bones of ancient China to ancient Greece to Mayan calendars, people have craved for prophecy in order to find out what's going to happen next. And that's because we all want to make the right decision. We don't want to miss something. The future is scary, so it's much nicer knowing that we can make a decision with some assurance of the outcome. But we have a new oracle, and its name is big data, or we call it Watson, or deep learning, or neural nets. And these are the kind of questions we ask of our oracle now. Like, what's the most efficient way to ship these phones from China to Sweden? Or what are the odds of my child being born with a genetic disorder? Or what are the sales volume we can predict for this product? I have a dog, her name is Elle, and she hates the rain. And I have tried everything to untrain her, but because I have failed at this, I also have to consult an oracle called Dark Sky every time before we go on a walk for very accurate weather predictions in the next 10 minutes. So sweet. So because of all of this, our oracle is a $122 billion industry. Now, despite the size of this industry, the returns are surprisingly low. Investing in big data is easy, but using it is hard. Over 73% of big data projects aren't even profitable. And I have executives coming up to me saying, we're experiencing the same thing. We invested in some big data system and our employees aren't making better decisions, and they're certainly not coming up with more breakthrough ideas. So this is all really interesting to me because I'm a technology ethnographer. I study and I advise companies on the patterns of how people use technology. And one of my interest areas is data. So why is having more data not helping us make better decisions? Especially for companies who have all these resources to invest in these big data systems. Why isn't it getting any easier for them? So I've witnessed the struggle firsthand. In 2009, I started a research position with Nokia. And at the time, Nokia was one of the largest cell phone companies in the world, dominating emerging markets like China, Mexico, and India, all places where I had done a lot of research on how low-income people use technology. And I spent a lot of extra time in China getting to know the informal economy. So I did things like working as a street vendor, selling dumplings to construction workers. Or I did field work, spending nights and days in internet cafes, hanging out with Chinese youth so I could understand how they were using games and mobile phones and using it between moving from the rural areas to the cities. And through all of this qualitative evidence that I was gathering, I was starting to see so clearly that a big change was about to happen among low-income Chinese people. Even though they were surrounded by advertisements for luxury products like fancy toilets, who wouldn't want one, and apartments and cars, through my conversations with them, I found out that the ads that actually enticed them the most were the ones for iPhones, promising them this entry into this high-tech life. And even when I was living with them in urban slums like this one, I saw people investing over half of their monthly income into buying a phone. And increasingly, they were Shanzai, which are affordable knockoffs of iPhones and other brands. They're very usable. Does the job. And after years of living with migrants and working with them and just, really doing everything that they were doing, I started piecing all these data points together. From the things that seemed like random, like me selling dumplings, to the things that were more obvious, like, tracking how much they were spending on their cell phone bills. And I was able to create this much more holistic picture of what was happening. And that's when I started to realize that even the poorest in China would want a smartphone and that they would do almost anything to get their hands on one. And you have to keep in mind, iPhones had just come out. It was 2009, so this was like 8 years ago. And Androids had just started looking like iPhones. And a lot of very smart and realistic people said, those smartphones, that's just a fad, right? Who wants to carry around these heavy things where batteries drain quickly and they break every time you drop them? But I had a lot of data and I was very confident about my insights. So I was very excited to share them with Nokia. But Nokia was not convinced because it wasn't big data. They said, we have millions of data points and we don't see any indicators of anyone wanting to buy a smartphone. And your data set of 100, as diverse as it is too weak for us to even take seriously. And I said, Nokia, you're right. Of course you wouldn't see this because, you're sending out surveys assuming that people don't know what a smartphone is. So of course you're not going to get any data back about people wanting to buy a smartphone in 2 years. Your surveys, your methods have been designed to optimize an existing business model. And I'm looking at these emergent human dynamics that haven't happened yet. We're, looking outside of market dynamics so that we can get ahead of it. Well, you know what happens to Nokia? Their business fell off a cliff. This This is the cost of missing something. It was unfathomable. But Nokia is not alone. I see organizations throwing out data all the time because it didn't come from a quant model or it doesn't fit in one. But it's not big data's fault. It's the way we use big data. It's our responsibility. Big data's reputation for success comes from quantifying very specific environments, like electricity power grids or delivery logistics or genetic code. When we're quantifying in systems that are more or less contained, but not all systems are as neatly contained. When you're quantifying in systems that are more dynamic, especially systems that involve human beings, forces are complex and unpredictable, and these are things that we don't know how to model so well. Once you predict something about human behavior, new factors emerge because conditions are constantly changing. That's why it's a never-ending cycle. You think you know something, and then something unknown enters the picture. And that's why just relying on big data alone increases the chance that we'll miss something while giving us this illusion that we already know everything. And what makes it really hard to see this paradox and even like wrap our brains around it is that we have this thing that I call the quantification bias, which is the unconscious belief of valuing the measurable over the immeasurable. And we often maybe experience this at our work, or we maybe work alongside colleagues who are like this, or even our whole entire company may be like this, where people become so fixated on that number that they can't see anything outside of it.
Okay, I think you get the idea. I wanted to provide you with some examples of how ethnography works in the real life. I will put this link also in the announcements in case you want to watch the rest of it. We watched about half of it. You can see it has almost 2 million views. So we'll take a look at that later on. All right, so I want to leave a little bit of time here in case you had some questions. Does anybody who's live have any questions about what you have due this week? There's, again, a lot, as always. This class goes really fast. Is there anything question-wise that you want to discuss? Don't forget to put your mic on if you do. And if not, you are free to go. I will provide this recording here shortly, and also the links that I requested, the LinkedIn for myself, if you want to take a look at LinkedIn, and also the rest of that TED Talk.
Thanks so much. No questions over here.
Okay. Take care, you guys. I'll stop recording.